The United States government is in possession of exotic materials that have been recovered from spacecraft from other worlds. That's what we've been told. We've been told that this year. Actually, back in May, when Luis Elizondo, former Pentagon employee who was in charge of UFO ATIP, or the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, when he was in charge of that, he came to understand that we are in possession of exotic materials. And this was his quote, and I'll link it. This is an article that was in the International Business Times. This is a quote that he made back in May. He says the United States government, he was asked basically if the government has collected any debris from any crashed flying saucers. And he said, the United States government is in possession of exotic material, and I will leave it at that. More analysis needs to be done. There is enough uniqueness about it where it requires additional analysis and additional expertise, and thankfully, there are pockets in the United States government that are willing to have the conversation and conduct the analysis. Of course there are pockets of course. Why wouldn't there be? I mean, how irresponsible would it be for the government to recover something from another planet, a spaceship like, let's say, in Roswell, and just put it in a warehouse and never look at it or study it and just, yeah, it looks like it's from outer space. Who cares? Let's throw it in this warehouse and won't tell nobody. No, that's not how it works. Anything that's been recovered over the years has been studied and looked at, and they're trying to, whoever's behind the scenes, whatever scientists are working for the United States government, all these years, different scientists, I'm sure, over the decades have been brought in, right? They've been looking at this. They've been trying to figure it out. They're trying to figure out how these things work and how they tick. I'm sure there's all kinds of studies and analysis going on all the time. Right now, as we speak, there's things going on. Probably 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Whatever they've recovered from these vehicles, they're looking at it. But think about that. You have somebody who worked for the United States government who said this year that, yes, we have exotic materials in our possession. And, this story was a story for a little bit, but then it just faded away. There's no follow-up to it. There's no follow-up. We should have follow-up to stuff like, okay, yeah, we have recovered materials from spaceships from other worlds. And exotic materials doesn't mean just spaceships either. I mean, that could mean bodies, right? And I certainly believe that bodies are part of this whole equation. I mean, if you looked at this true story, I know a lot of people, they roll their eyes, they shake their heads, Roswell, come on. No. There is something to Roswell. There's always been something to Roswell. It's been the mainstream media that really has made this Roswell seem like, like something that just, imagination, which it is not. There were hundreds of first-hand, second-hand, third-hand witnesses, and if you were to read the books that independent researchers have compiled throughout the years, and I've talked about these books, on different podcasts, and you were to study the whole Roswell situation, you would understand that something definitely happened there, and something did not involve any sort of balloon at all. The only involvement with a balloon was that was the excuse that the government used to cover it up. They tried to say it was a weather balloon, and then decades later, when the story, when a story of a cover-up emerged, then they try to say, well, it was a special balloon. It was just part of this top secret project to try to determine when Russia was, going to detonate their atomic bomb. So it was just the same story, except a little bit more Cold War style kind of story. But it was all nonsense. It's nonsense. That's not what people saw. They didn't see a balloon. And the people that were involved in this, like Jesse Marcel, he was the top intelligence officer that was in charge of this, that saw this material initially. One of the first people to see the material, actually. And he was completely, he knew what weather balloons were, and he would have known. And other people have seen this stuff. They said it was exotic material that you could, it was weird metal that if you could crumble it up, very thin, lightweight. You crumble it up like something like aluminum foil, but then it would just spread back out like liquid and be perfect, like it wasn't crumbled. And of course, there were people that saw bodies, alien bodies. There were some people who said that one of these aliens was still alive. And there was other people that said, yeah, there was an alien that was still alive, and he died a couple of weeks or a month later. And there were people who saw these things. And so that's the beginning of this. That's when exotic materials were first recovered, apparently, by the United States government. And I think there's been other incidents throughout the decades where other materials have been recovered, and they've been looking at this. Of course they'd be looking at this. They've been trying to reverse engineer it. That's why this has been a secret for all these years. And then for whatever reason, over the past 4 years, there's been some sort of, it seems like a slow disclosure process. For whatever reason, maybe the people in the government feel bad that they've been keeping this a secret. We got to let the world know about this. We've been stunting history too long now. We got to get it out there. But how do we get it out there? Well, that's the whole thing now, isn't it? Who knows what they're thinking or what the thought process is or why we're going through this. But yeah, so they admitted it. You have Luis Elizondo saying, yes, they have exotic material. The guy's not lying. Either apparently he seems like he's been authorized to say this, or he was authorized to say it at this point. And now, who knows? Maybe some other forces in the Pentagon are now trying to, wrest control away from the Congress again. Who knows what this new office they formed? We've been talking about that. I mean, who knows what's going on behind the scenes, and why some people want to keep this a secret and why some people believe it needs to come out. That's what it seems. It seems like there's two groups behind the scene, two mindsets behind the scenes trying to, want to do different things right now. That's what it seems like. But what do I know? Or maybe it's all agreed upon and this is all a big show. I don't know. But the fact is that we have the United States government, it's been admitted, they have materials from spacecraft that have crashed here, apparently. That's a big story. And yet, this hasn't been talked about since. I mean, this whole year has gone by. There's been no real discussion about this. You don't see anyone in the mainstream media trying to follow up on this. Like, this comment was made by this guy, Elizondo, and it's just been not talked about that much. Like I've seen him talking on different podcasts, and it gets brought up here and there. And we have stuff from outer space, from other planets. Meanwhile, we have like many 90+% in the scientific community still trying to figure out ways to figure out if there's alien life on some distant planet somewhere. Like maybe there's some microbes they could identify and say, oh yeah, see. But at the same time, the United States government has recovered stuff from other places. So what are we doing here? What are we doing? Let's talk about the stuff we got here that came from someplace else. How come we're not talking about that? I mean, if I was a mainstream scientist, right, and I heard this information, I saw this story with this guy talking, this guy who worked for the government, and he goes on TV and makes a statement that yes, there are exotic materials, but I'll leave it at that. If I was a scientist, I'd be on TV every night saying, I demand to know what you're talking about here. We've been wasting our time all these years with SETI and all this other nonsense, and we already have the proof, and you're not showing. Well, how come the scientists don't do that? Like instead, they're putting up giant telescopes to point into the Alpha Centauri system to see if they could maybe determine if there's some planets around these two suns and if they are, then we could probably guess pretty close that okay, those planets they're probably just like or similar to Earth, and there's probably life there, maybe, right? So they're trying to do stuff like that. Meanwhile, you have a guy here who worked in the Pentagon, who was in charge of this UFO group, who's now on TV this year telling everybody that, yeah, we recovered exotic materials, and I'll leave it at that. Okay, if I was a mainstream scientist, it'd be like, what are we wasting our time with these giant telescopes when we have the stuff right here? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, you actually have an official from the Pentagon telling you there is we have exotic materials from other worlds. Okay, does that mean that Roswell was real after all, and that whole lie about the balloon was bullshit? What does that mean? If I was mainstream scientist that's been, I feel like we've been getting jerked around all these years, told lies. I want to know. Okay, what do you got? Tell us more. Well, Elizondo's obviously not in a position. He's saying that's the most he's allowed to. I guess that's all he's authorized to say. But you would think that some other people would be stepping forward. I'm just some regular guy out here in the world, just giving my opinion. I'm a nobody. I'm not a scientist. I'm just an interested person, an interested citizen who wants to know more. So they're not. Who's going to listen to some nobody out there in the world of YouTube or on some podcast? They're not going to listen. They're going to listen, but they'll listen to somebody who has a name. What about what's his face, Neil deGrasse Tyson? Like, how come he wasn't like, hey? You would think that he would step forward and say, so you're saying. If I was Neil deGrasse Tyson, he does a really good, what he's good at is coming out and just, debunking all these things and acting stupid about the possibility that there's aliens coming here. Whenever you see him talking about it, you would think someone like him with his kind of voice would say, hey, wait a minute. So you just said that this guy who was in charge of ATIP, he just went on TV, and this is months ago now. We're talking back in May. Okay. And nothing's been really done about it. It's, again, it's been chuckled off for the most part. I mean, it's been taken seriously by the mainstream since, but this hasn't been talked about. You would think that someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson would, be. Well, wait a minute. So you're saying that our government, the United States government, has recovered exotic materials that you're saying you're alluding to that they're from outer space, from extraterrestrial spacecraft? I mean, I would be asking those questions, but they're not getting asked. Why are they not being asked? Why are our mainstream scientists sitting around and pretending that these things aren't being said by an official who was in charge of this program? Why are they pretending? I don't know. Do they not want to accept this reality? Again, like sometimes I wonder, does mainstream scientists believe it's more important for them to point out to a planet and say, or come up with their own proof somehow, find a microbe on Mars that proves, hey, see, there is life on other planets. Look, we found this little microbe that, it's a germ that died 1 billion years ago. That proves that life was on Mars. Is it more important to do that than for it to seem as though we've been discovered by something else that's superior to us technologically, more advanced than we are? Is that what it is? I don't know. I'm trying to figure this out. But if I was a scientist and somebody made that statement, I'd be trying to ask more questions here. So wait a minute. Hold on a second. I'd be like, that's just me. If I was a mainstream scientist, I'd be wanting to know more. You have exotic materials. The government has exotic material. You're telling me that the government has recovered extraterrestrial materials, and you're not sharing. You're not telling. Well, I'd like to know more about this. Could you show us that, please? That's if I was a mainstream scientist. But I don't know. I don't know what their game is or why they pretend that this stuff isn't happening. I mean, again, we've had the Pentagon confirm. We've had the Pentagon confirm that there's objects out there they cannot explain. They cannot explain them. And you have a guy that worked here. Again, I know it sounds, but it was said. We've recovered these things from outer space. That's basically what he said. From other planets that we're studying and being analyzed. Okay, and you're on a mainstream astronomer that shows up on a TV show every other week and podcast all the time, and you're on TV and instead of asking the question you want more, instead of asking for more information or calling up somebody at the Pentagon, hey, what are you talking about? There's exotic materials you got. Well, how about letting us know what they are? How come they're not doing that? It's a question. It's a question I have. But anyway, we have it. It's been said. It's too late. And now we have the Pentagon trying to put Pandora back into the box. And of course, it's too late now. It's too late. It's too late for that. I don't know what they're thinking. Again, it could be maybe this is all sort of some grand scheme just to keep this whole thing in the public eye. I don't know. But if there's people in the Pentagon that are seriously trying to push Pandora back into their box, it's not going to work. It's too late. The cat's out of the bag. It's out of the bag. Not only has the Pentagon admitted that there's things out there they don't know what they are or where they're coming from, and they're not Chinese or Russian, so forget about that. But not only have they admitted that, but you have somebody else telling you that they've recovered exotic materials. We need to know more about them exotic materials. What do you got? Are there bodies? Are there specimens of beings from other worlds, remains on ice, perhaps? How about sharing that information? How about showing us some pictures? Let's hear some government scientists come to a podium somewhere and talk about this with an overhead projector showing some images. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? To hear the truth about something instead of just keep maintaining this cover up that's ridiculous by this point. It's ridiculous at this point. It's extremely ridiculous.